So if you read the book, you might realize that most people that are involved in this have forgotten so much. So much. So, well, one thing I was surprised is how Roy Allen, somebody who was a mega alcoholic at the time, seemed to have a much better memory of certain events than people who were actually physically there on the night Bon Scott died. So this is where we get to my second most moments that piss me off. So what pissed me off the most is the contradicting testimonies again. So getting to the investigation of Bon's death, this is the worst part. No one can agree on the same stuff. So, for example, just to quote page 277, page 267, sorry. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And my other problem, so all these contradicting testimonies have been made by the most incompetent people you've ever fucking witnessed. So no one remembers shit. All of them are junkies, contradicting each other, and the more you dig, the worse it gets. It gets very confusing. The night Bon died is divided in two different story testimonies. They are based, there's two versions, because we don't know what officially happened. The first version is the Pete Way, Paul Chapman version. So Pete Way and Paul Chapman were members of the British rock band UFO. And the second version is based on Joe Furey and Silversmith's testimonies. So they were just Bon's junkie friends that night. So they're both very different, and none of them remembers anything from that night. None of them remembers precisely what happened. The four of them contradict each other. None of them validates the other testimony. They all say different stuff. And as you can imagine, it really, really pissed me off. It made me so mad because I got so angry at the level of incompetence. And so from here now, so this is a word you're gonna watch me say a lot. Incompetence. To me, that resumes very well, or that sums up, very well what happened to Bon that night. Incompetence. I'll explain why. So this is another example of the dilemma between the Paul Chapman, Pete Way story versus the Joe Furey, Silversmith take on what happened to Bon on the night of the 18 February 1980. So this is a comment about Joe Furey. Joe, unusually for someone who was supposed to have been in tears when he called Chapman, can't recall much of what happened. There would have been an effort made to contact AC/DC. I might have wronged Paul Chapman knowing that he might know somebody. Those two bands played and toured together a bit and whatever. Did you know Alistair at all? No, not really. A pommy guy. Silver knew him. I'd met him recently, I think, at the time. So, to me, that sums up, that's another example of they're not remembering anything at all. Like, Chapman says that Joe was in tears when Bon died, but yet he can't even recall that happening. Why was that? You might say, well, there are testimonies suggesting that Joe Furey and Silversmith that night were somewhere in an apartment in London doing heroin, snorting, not giving a crap about anything happening. So I will sum up the two theories in a few minutes. I will read you my summary of what the author Jesse Fink establishes are the two possibilities of what happened to Bon Scott that night. So first, let's start with the official version. So the official accepted version of what happened to Bon Scott is the following. He's been written down as death by misadventure or alcohol poisoning. Bon would have choked on his vomit, then suffocated and died. So this is the accepted version by everybody, because what happened is when Bon died, there was never a good autopsy done, there was no toxicology report done, so there's a lot of information that are missing, which is why the author has a great theory that Bon would have died of a heroin overdose. This is where it gets juicy, everyone. This is where you will either lose your mind or you're just gonna listen to me. So Alistair Kinner. This is his name. So Alistair Kinner thought that Bon was just asleep in the back of his car, left him there for the night. In a cold and dark London night, in February, so winter time, he would have left him a little note, go like, hey, that's my address, and if you wake up, come see me. But as you can imagine, Bon never woke up, and when he came back the next day, he was like, oh, he's still there. My God, he's still in my car. So, based on Alistair, so I will read you a quote. So this is based on Alistair's 2005 statement to Maggie Montalbano. It must have been 4 or 5 a.m. by that time, and I slept until about 11 when I was awakened by a friend, Leslie Loads. I was so hungover that I asked Leslie to do me a favor of checking on Bon. He did so, and returned to tell me my car was empty. So I went back to sleep, assuming that Bon had awoken and taken a taxi home. Did you just hear that, guys? He said the car was empty, and he thought Bon had taken a taxi home. I'm sorry, what the So this is his official statement, right? This is a statement he made in 2005, so we're talking many years. So Bon died in 1980. So this is very, very, very strange testimony. And even the author loses his mind after reading this. So first of all, I'll quote this. This is the most perplexing part of Alistair's statement. Who on earth is Leslie Loads? No Loads has ever been interviewed or spoken publicly about the day Bon died, which surely would have happened by now, unless Loads, as I suspect, was a pseudonym. So some people to this day are being protected. Still lies. I don't think that Bon Scott's death is a big conspiracy or anything. The author says this as well. It's not a big conspiracy, but there's strong evidences pointing that a lot of things very concerning happened that night. That some people have been protected, some people have lied, and a lot of people are so incompetent. So Alistair Kinner, now we're going to talk about him, Mr. King of Incompetence, in my opinion. So he is described as a Syd Barrett type of figure, sort of lost in a dream while awake. He's a little bit like vapory, whatever. Unfortunately, I'm not going to do his entire background, but a bit of a loser. Lived with his mom most of his life. Never gave child support. Never really held any relationships. So I was sorry, and he was as you can imagine, he was a great friend of Silversmith. So anyway, there are so many shocking facts about this man. So for an entire chapter, so Jesse Fink proceeds to deconstruct Alistair's testimony, claiming one after the other, like, this doesn't make sense, this is not true, is not compelling with other facts that I figure out from that night. So it's incredible, absolutely insane. I couldn't put the book down. I just couldn't stop. I had to read and read and read. I was like, this is crazy. So his apparent official testimony makes zero sense, guys. It doesn't make sense. And it's close to the truth. But some things don't add up. And some things have never been answered as well. But you know what? I don't think Alistair is responsible for Bond's death, judging by the theories that will be coming up. But his incompetence played a major part in what happened to Bond that night. But the craziest fact we need to know about Alistair Kinner, and this is absolutely mind-blowing. So Alistair sailed off one day from the coast of France to Spain in 2006, okay? And mysteriously vanished, disappeared. His body was never found, okay? In 2015, so the Spanish court issued a death certificate. So this is absolutely a crazy story. Technically, Alistair Kinner is dead, so we will never know what happened that night officially. But this is so insane. So 2 facts that absolutely blew my mind before I disclose Jesse Fink's 2 theories. So the first fact is there was allegedly bruises that were found on Bond's neck. So this is the quote. So one person who saw Bond's corpse, Ian Jeffrey, was, according to Walker, struck by the fact Bond's neck was twisted and showed bruising. It was accepted then, with an autopsy yet to be performed, that Bond had choked on his own vomit. This is possibly an important clue. How to explain the bruising Jeffrey allegedly saw on Bond's neck? The bruising cannot be explained by choking, unless Bond was trying desperately not to suffocate and grabbing his own neck to try to clear a constricted airway. Roy Allen came very close himself to choking on his own vomit. He thinks it's important to understand how easily it can happen and could have happened to Bond. Further, had Bond been startled into consciousness from choking, enough to desperately clutch at his own mouth or throat, he surely would have had the presence of mind to open a door from inside the car to try to get help. That didn't happen. So this is where you're like, what happened? What happened? I want to know, because this was the first time I heard this. I've heard a lot of videos on YouTube, in books, even podcasts, claiming like, oh, you know, Bond just choked on his vomit and that's about it. But no one I've ever heard mention there was bruises on Bond's neck and that it was probably twisted and broken. Absolutely blew me away. So what is more plausible is that the bruising was caused by mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, which in Forcenic pathology parlance is a category of damage. According to the Forcenic Science Manual, Knight's Forcenic Pathology, bruising of the face and neck, finger marks and nail marks on the face and neck, and damage to the lips and inner gums are markers of mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, when the face and neck have been gripped by hands. In that case, if there were neck bruising and twisting, it would suggest Alistair, or someone else, possibly Xena, attempted to resuscitate Bond and later move him, which might support the notion he was already dead when he got to Alistair's flat in East Dulwich. That's one thing I forgot to mention as well, that no one in every podcast video on YouTube, whatever, that I've seen mention this, so there was somebody else in the car that night. There were actually 3. It wasn't just Bond and Alistair, it was Xena. So this was a girl they met at the club. I will talk about this later. It's a girl they met at a club. Xena, Alistair, and Bond, so they all left the three of them together from the club. So yes, so the author think these bruising were because somebody that we don't know, might never know, tried to resuscitate Bond. So proving that he would have died probably much earlier than the official version suggests. And second fact that the author never comes back on this, and that made me feel like this is pretty compelling. This is very strange. So there was a maid. So the maid came to clean Bond's apartment in the morning of the 19th of February 1980, and she found the key of the apartment on the floor. So she comes in, there's a carpet, and she found the key on the floor. And all the lights in the apartment were on, and so was the radio, like full blast. No one there. No explanation given by anybody. And even the author didn't come back on this evidence, and that left me, why? You know, I thought, how does that happen? I think the author forgot to mention this in his final theory, because this, to me, this was very compelling. So finally we come to it. So these are the theories of what happened to Bon Scott from the night of the 18th February to the 20th February 1980. So this is theory 1. I summed up, well, actually what the author came up with, because it goes on for a few pages, so I summed up a little bit shorter. So in short, theory 1. So Bond has finished writing Back in Black and wants to celebrate. He meets with Paul Chapman and Joe Furey somewhere in London, possibly with Pete Way as well. He leaves them to go buy heroin. During this time, Chapman and Joe get to Chapman's flat in Fulham. Bond phones Silversmith and chats. He asks if she wants to join him, but says no. She suggests he meets with Alistair, that he has known for a while. They meet and agree to go to the Music Machine Club, where heroin and free booze will be in abundance. Bond drinks, and to sort of imitate everyone, because heroin was everywhere at that time, would have snorted heroin as well. Early in the morning of the 19th, Bond, Xena, and Alistair leave the party to get more heroin for Chapman. But on the way, Bond starts nodding off in the car and loses consciousness. He vomits. Alistair panics and calls Silver. Not knowing Bond had snorted heroin, she brushes it off, and as just another alcohol intoxication, it'll pass. Since Bond's not breathing, Alistair attempts to resuscitate Bond, but fails, in the process leaving marks on Bond's neck. Bond has died instantly. In a state of shocks, Alistair doesn't know what to do. He cannot take the body to the hospital. If they find traces of heroin, he could be arrested and jailed, and so everyone involved that night. He decides to go home and leave the body in the back seat, covering it with blankets. He waits half a day until it's night again, moves Bond's body to the front seat, then drives to the hospital and leaves Silver as the contact name and runs out of the place. So, in my honest opinion, I'll explain after, but I find this theory very plausible. Theory number 2. So almost the same, but doesn't involve Paul Chapman nor Pete Way. Bond, Alistair, and Xena leaves the Music Machine Club to go party elsewhere. They pile into Alistair's 105. Bond passes out, and Alistair phones Silversmith, who suggests to just put some blankets and let him sleep. No one suspects an overdose. They leave him a note, and Al and Xena go to sleep in his apartment. At 11 a.m., a groggy Alistair asks Xena to check if Bond's in the car. She goes and sees, but also groggy and maybe still stoned from last night, sees nothing. They sleep the rest of the day, unaware that Bond has passed away in the car. Alistair decides to go visit his girlfriend Janice at the hospital, but finds Bond dead in the back seat covered in vomit. His skin cold and lifeless. He drives the body to the hospital and leaves Silversmith's number. So as you can see, I feel like Theory 2 is just like so crazy and doesn't make sense. Especially so you would think that, so there's, they leave the body the whole night in the car. And the author proceeds to say, like, Bon Scott at this moment in 1980, so this is after the album Highway to Hell was starting to be a bit famous. He had more money, his face was a bit around, he'd been on television, radios, anything. So you would have thought, because this is a street where people walk by, people are going to see somebody sleeping in the backseat of the car. He says they might have recognized Bon Scott. He was not unknown. So why would it, you know... And there are no reports of anyone walking on that street that day claiming like, oh, there was a body or anything like that in the back seat, which is why Theory 1 to me is very compelling. And my theory on this, so I think Theory 1 is the right one, but with some twist, I don't think they were going to get heroin for Paul Chapman, whatever. I think they were just going to party, whatever. That indeed Bond had just finished writing the lyrics to Back in Black, and that he just wanted to have fun. There, because I heard, so this is very similar to the Jim Morrison case, in case you didn't know. So Jim Morrison just didn't mysteriously die in a bathtub, by the way. Jim Morrison also died from an overdose. Actually, he died from snorting pure heroin in the bathroom at the Rock and Roll Circus in Paris. So how did that happen? This was a heroin he got for his girlfriend Pamela, because Pamela was a known heroin user. What is unknown is the reasons that pushed Jim Morrison to snort the heroin, which he didn't know was pure, which killed him instantly that day in the bathroom. And I could do a whole video on this, but yeah, so the Bon Scott story is actually pretty close. They're thinking that Bon would have snorted heroin at the party for fun because it was around a lot back in that day, and that a few minutes later they leave the party. Bon is stoned, not feeling too well, so this heroin has been combined with a lot of alcohol. This is Bon Scott, known to drink so much alcohol, and yet still able to perform shows almost completely normally. Heroin theory is very compelling. The heroin might have been too pure, not cut enough, might have killed Bon Scott almost instantly. And so when Bond starts losing consciousness in the car, I think Alistair and Xena panics. And I think Alistair probably tried to resuscitate Bond, giving him mouth-to-mouth, maybe CPR, I don't know. Which would have left the bruises. I think they tried to go up Bond's apartment and resuscitate him there, lighting all the lights, turning on the radio, but nothing worked. He was already gone. It explains because there was a 2-hour gap that no one can explain from the time they leave the party to the time they get to Alistair's apartment, which apparently was a like 30 minutes drive from the party to his apartment. So this amount of time is unexplained, so I think they went to Bond's apartment and tried to resuscitate him there. Didn't work, so I think they put Bond back in the car and had no idea what to do. They were scared because of the reasons I evoked before. So I think they didn't want to be jailed because heroin is illegal. They decide to just wait. So this way the heroin will come out of his body. There will be no traces left. And so they just go to Alistair's apartment, put some blankets on Bond to cover his body, leave him there for the whole night, go back the next day, drive him to the hospital, and leave like nothing happened. So I think this is the official story. I think this is what truly happened to Dear Bond. But yeah, there are a lot of similarities with the Jim Morrison story. Jim Morrison, so allegedly the drug dealer that sold the heroin to Jim Morrison, by the way, was Marianne Faithfull's boyfriend at the time, and publicly claimed, well, at least to her, that he indeed killed. He was convinced he killed Jim Morrison, and he is the one that brought. So after Jim died at the Rock and Roll Circus in Paris, he brought Jim's dead body to his apartment, and he put him in the bathtub. And what really shocked me, that I didn't know about Jim Morrison, by the way, so when the French firemen came to find Jim Morrison's body, they said Jim's head was actually where the tap is, so, and not the opposite way. And the water was cold, not warm, which they are pretty sure the person who did this used the water to preserve it. So very, very strange. But again, so same sort of story. The drug dealer did this so he wouldn't get jailed, because heroin, selling drugs, was illegal and is still illegal. Except for marijuana. If you're in Canada, California, you're like, yeah, no, marijuana's legal here. Yeah, it is, but everything else, no. So whatever happened to Bon Scott that night is definitely tragic, and I believe an accident. It left so many AC/DC fans feeling robbed of what could have been, and this is why it has been such a controversy, so people have tried to understand what happened, because no one could believe that Bon, who was already such a big alcoholic, who had proven could tolerate extreme amount of alcohol.
The other boys in the band say that you're great, but a little special. You know what they mean by that?
I'm a special drunkard. I drink too much.
What do you think they really mean?
I don't know. It could be anything coming from them.
Do you feel you're a star?
No, I see stars sometimes.
And who that night wasn't that drunk, could have possibly died from that. There's more evidences. I'm not going to go through all of them. These were the most compelling ones and the most shocking ones to me. But if you want to read the book, I highly recommend. I think your vision on the subject will definitely change. So disturbing. I think that the conclusion we can draw from Bon Scott's death is the following, in my opinion. Kids, don't do drugs. You will die, and the success, the beautiful things you might have achieved and left on this planet, you're not going to finish them. You're not going to have brought as much joy as you thought you could have brought to this planet. And I think that's a little sad. So don't do drugs. I think that's what I personally got from this whole story, is we don't do drugs. It's not worth it. You can't remember shit. You can't function. I don't see the fun. We need to try and be strong. We need to try and be strong and continue and not do drugs. Bon did drugs, drank a lot, because he didn't feel... He was apparently a very lonely man, sad, probably extremely... I think he was just very, very tired, and rockstar life, it just happens. My personal take on this is, I think a lot of men in the 70s were not able to talk about their feelings, which is why you have so many men rockers from this era that were alcoholic, drugs, whatever, because it was not well seen for men to disclose their feelings, just being sad, depressed. It was seen as a total weakness, and I think most men prefer to be caught dead than actually tell about how they felt in some of the traumatic experience they might have had through their life. I think this is what happened to Bon Scott. I think he might have gone through certain things in his life that made him feel very bad, and like most men of the 70s always preferred to never talk about it, just drink, just take the drugs, forget. Understood this theory is thanks to Bobby Jean Brown, who was married with singer Janie Lane of the band Warrant, and Jenny Lane was also a heavy alcoholic, and apparently she thought the reason that he drank so much, he was never capable, he had so much trouble explaining how he felt, never wanted to feel sad, never wanted to explain his emotions, and just preferred drinking and leaving. So I think it's the result of men of that time not being able to talk about how they felt, not being able to talk about being sad, being lonely, seeing it as a horrible weakness, and just therefore slowly killing themselves instead of just telling about their trauma. But that was the time, and there's nothing we can do about it. So, on a positive note, though, even though we felt robbed, and this is personal, but I believe that what happened to Bon Scott was meant to be. I believe that was the path his soul chose, because he felt, his soul had a lesson through this scenario, so this is why it happened this way. But yeah, I think he didn't suffer when he died. I think he went out really quickly, and I don't think it's the theory that people claim. He didn't die all alone. He didn't die all alone. He was with Xena and Alistair, but it happened so fast that no one could do anything. And that's the sad part. So I'm gonna end my video with this last part. So this is gonna be the subject of the next video. So very soon after his death, Bond's London apartment got emptied very quickly. His song notebook disappeared, never to be seen again. And what was the only items that were returned to his family was the bag of clothes he left Australia with. So very, very strange. So from here, it brings to the next question that Jesse Fink also ends his book on. Did Bond write the lyrics to Back in Black? And where has the notebook gone? So these are questions that we'll try to answer in the next video. Again, so this is going to be very compelling. So we're going to talk about more the Bond's Florida experience. I don't know why first half I wanted to talk about Bond's death, but I kind of followed the order of the book. The order of the book was, it's about a 400 pages book, so I kind of talk about every single aspect of it. I didn't want to do, I think this video is already long enough. I spent most of my day doing this. It's going to be very interesting, and I'm going to try to show you the most compelling proofs I can come up with. It's said and done, and I hope you enjoyed it.